So as I was going through the video, one of the key things in the Martin Luther King speech that I saw that really resonated to me was the way he broke down his presentation. So his presentation was at a high school in Philadelphia, and the title of his presentation is What is Your Life's Blueprint? And he goes on and he starts, there's certain stuff from that speech that I took out that resonates very much with my life story. So one of the things that when he kind of positioned this, what is your life's blueprint, when he started with it. And then he has his 3 principles that he's breaking down in this speech. The first one is you got to be able to have a deep belief in your own identity. You have to have self-worth. And you have to feel like you matter, that you count, like you matter. And as I was reflecting on that video, I was like, that's kind of funny because those were some of the stuff that my mom put in place for us when we first resettled here. I remember when the community found out that a new family from Congo resettled nearby. So people, like the first couple of weeks, people would just knock at our door and say, hey, we heard you guys are a Congolese family that just moved to the area. How can we help you guys? And the community that came alongside me looked nothing like me. At the time, I know a lot of times people think Manchester is very diverse. It's more diverse today than it was in the past. People that knocked on my door, they were all white people that knocked on my door. And some of them were French-Canadian families that have been in Manchester for a long period of time, and they can speak French. At the time, that's the only language that we spoke was French. And they said, hey, how can we help you? And those families came alongside us. But as we were trying to find our identity in this new community, new space, we had to really, really dig deeper within who we were in order for us to be able to hold on to it. First, one of the things is, when you're a refugee, you kind of lose your identity because you're saying that you're betting your life by denying essentially your sovereignty in order for a better life, right? Because you're running from persecution or your life is in danger in some form of a way that you decide that the international world is going to, to advocate for you that one day you're going to resettle somewhere or things get better in your home country. So when we moved to the States, I would say, it probably was a lot easier to say that we probably had an identity crisis. But fortunately, my mother held on to that. She held on to who we were and where we came from. And I remember times and times that she would just really speak a word of encouragement to us. She would say, hey, man, you guys are going to be something. Hey, man, I have nothing to give you except all the opportunity these countries have for you. There's nothing that you can't do. And as a young child, I held on to that. And the more I held on to it, the more I found my way throughout the environment that I was in. Even though, for the most part, the folks that were around me weren't really a full representation of where I was, especially in terms of skin color-wise. And every milestone that we had within the first year of being in America made us believe more and more that we were going to succeed in this new country. So some of those milestones were, we were put in school. My mother started working. Within the first 2 months of being in the States, she realized that a lot of the federal support that we were receiving, they were going to, 6 months in, it was going to be eliminated. So she was like, I don't have time to sit around in English learning school. I have to start working. So 2 months in, she started working. So once she started working, she realized that transportation is hard in New Hampshire. So she needed to find a way to get her driver's license. Luckily, the community that was around us, they came alongside us. One of the families said, hey, Bernadette, I'll teach you how to drive. She went and she got her license. And then the next thing was she needed to get a vehicle. Mind you, we just moved here, so she didn't really have much of a credit. Another family came alongside us and said, hey, Bernadette, we're going to co-sign you in your first car. She got a vehicle. Once we had a vehicle, it was like, oh man, we have a vehicle. This is unbelievable. We've been here for 5 months. My mom is working. We have a place of our own, and we have a vehicle. So those milestones were critical to us. For the children, it was a lot easier for us to adapt, at least, because we're going to school. English is the second language classes. There were kids from different countries there. Kind of wrestling through this whole identity of like who you are. You want to fit in. And the second principle that I pulled out of that speech, he goes on and start talking about determination of excellence in areas of your endeavors. So you gotta have confidence behind what you want to do and where you want to go. And obviously in a very charismatic way that Martin Luther King was making this speech. And as I'm listening to him, I'm like, oh, that's so interesting, because that was the next thing. It was the fact that the idea of where we wanted to go was our driver. It wasn't necessarily the resources that we had, because we didn't really have much resources. Yeah, we made some serious, breakthrough early on, but we still lack the resources that some of you guys might say those resources are critical in order for you to have success. So we became very resourceful. Anybody that was around us, we always asked for questions. Hey, how can we do this? How can we do that? We never allowed our limitation to be what held us down or held us back from moving forward. So within the first year, we continue to move forward. Second year, third year, fourth year. But the time we were in the States for 3 years, I would say 3.5 years, I wrestled with this thing about my identity very much so, because there's certain aspect of American culture that was like amazing, that I loved the most, especially hip-hop. Hip-hop was something that I gravitated towards. But it was interesting because a lot of my mom's friends who were originally from Africa were actually very against that, because they were afraid that the white community that came alongside my family might not like that side of what we were, at least what the children were adapting to. Because there are a certain aspect of hip-hop that carries this negative narrative of what a black person is, or even the way that you dress. I remember my mother started braiding my hair. Oh my goodness, the world ended. People said, Bernadette, you're braiding Deo's hair? He has cornrows? No. You don't want him to have cornrows. So this was other African immigrants that were living in our community that were coming to my mother saying, you will lessen the chance of your children's success if you allow them to carry themselves in this image, because this image is not really the best image of how people see black people. And I remember my mother actually beginning to distance herself away from some of her friends, because she said, listen, we overcame the persecution of Congo. You're going to sit here and criticize me for allowing my son to have cornrows. That has nothing to do with who he is. And the more I saw that, the more I started to really take ownership in who I was and what drove me. It didn't mean that I compromised areas where I felt like I needed to press on harder in order for me to move forward, especially with education, because that was the key. I remember multiple times where my mother would say, education is the key. That's all you guys have. I have nothing else to give you except education. If you're going to go to school, you're going to learn. I might not be able to help you out with your homework, but we're going to find someone that's going to help you. But it had nothing to do with me being distracted by my identity of what I held on to. And then I found myself in this kind of this whirlpool of like, hey, there's this culture that's really reflecting who I am a lot, that I'm grabbing onto, which was really the hip hop culture that gave me a lot of freedom through music, dance, expression. And then kind of fast forward towards that, I joined this performing art program that traveled in inner city America, and that was really the first time I was exposed to African American culture, like here in America. Because for the most part, my direct interaction with it was really based on the limitation around my community in Manchester, which wasn't really a full scope of what African American culture is. So this organization did a lot of inner city programs, and I got to travel to different places. I remember early on, West Side Chicago, East Side Chicago, West Side, East Side Philly, all these different areas. And then I was even immersed in it even more because I got to experience the culture at firsthand. I got to see what the dances were, right? Fresh dances. I remember one time I was in Philadelphia and I was like moonwalking, and the students were like, "Oh, that's lame." During that time, they were doing SpongeBob and the Wu-Tang dance. Like that was like the popular dance in Philly. And I remember coming back home, I was like, I got to learn this. I got to master this. And then the following year, I went back, and I knew it. Once they were dancing to a style of music called Baltimore party music. Once the beat hit, you can do the Wu-Tang and SpongeBob. But to me, it was like, wow, man, I'm finding myself like this is really like a side of me. So by the time I graduated out of high school, dance became like a big part of who I was. And I remember, a lot of people just thought it was a phase, right? They were like, oh, eventually you're gonna get out of it. But the interesting thing is, by the time I got to college, dance is actually what kind of paid my way through college. By the time I was here at NEC, I would travel to teach dance at 3 different studios, and dance kind of paid my way through college. So as I was listening to the speech, I'm like, wow, there's so much correlation to this key principle that Martin Luther King was speaking about in this speech. And I'm just reflecting on kind of the critical principles that my mom put in place that allowed me to grab onto who I was as a person and what it meant for me to be a dark-skinned person in America. The last principle in his speech was commitment to the internal principle of beauty and love and justice. There was something that he said that really resonated to me, which I actually thought it was super powerful in this speech. And the notion was, you have the responsibility to make a difference for yourself. You have the responsibility to make a difference within your environment and your community. And to me, that really resonated a lot, because as my family was navigating through acclimating in America and having all this milestone, all of a sudden we started finding the environment around us. There were more and more immigrants that started to move around in that area. And we didn't wait for like a strategic plan that someone came back and said, oh, this is what you have to do. We went back to the things that supported us and helped us move forward. And we said, hey, we're going to start giving that back. And all of a sudden, we started to see the impact that started to make in those people's lives. And that became kind of like my mission. Always finding ways to give back. Always finding ways to represent for others. Always finding ways to be bold. I remember when I was in NEC, I used to take a lot of my classmates to an after-school program in Manchester that I've been involved with for so long called Bring It. And I knew for sure for some of the students, like that might have been really the only experience they would have had, that they were really interacting with students from other culture in that level. And I remember I used to take a lot of the soccer team players from here. They would go down to Manchester and play soccer with those students. And my students at Bring It, they were from all over the world. So the civic engagement side of things, I realized it wasn't even in the sake of like, oh, I got to do this because it looks good, or I got to do this because it fulfills me. It just became embedded in who I was, because I realized, hey, there was a point in time where, I was struggling. If nobody came alongside of me or my family, well, I would have never gotten the opportunity to move forward. So today, as I kind of conclude in my presentation to you guys, I was looking at the question in the program that said, how are you going to move forward with your dream? And I was thinking about it in 2 parts, right? How are you going to move forward with your dream personally? how are you going to move forward with the folks that are around you? How are you going to support their dreams in order to make their dreams come true? Because I started to realize more and more, what changed my family's trajectory wasn't just our ability to advocate for ourselves, but it was also really critical for the people that were around us that might have had the resources that came alongside us and said, hey, here's where I can help. Here's who I can recommend to. And I believe we all have those opportunities within our life where we can support others. And resources doesn't always relate to money. And that's something that I've learned along the way. Resources just means sometimes you just being there to listen to someone. To sincerely open your ears and just hear someone out. Sometimes it means you actually recommending somebody. You saying, hey, I know this person that you might need to talk to. And then in terms of you personally, what are ways that you can push your dreams forward? One of the things that I noticed in a lot of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech was he mentioned several times that he knew what he was advocating for during that time, he was not going to fully live to see it come to fruition. But he knew that the impact was there, that others were going to experience it. So one of my challenge to you is, what are the limitations that's holding you back from you fully pursuing the dreams that you have deep within your heart? What are the limitations that's holding you back from you to extend yourself in order to support others? So my last thing is, it's interesting. I get an opportunity to really work with a lot of different organizations. The cool thing is when I left NEC, I had a State Department job that I was dreaming about to get. I remember my professor, Wayne Lesperin, even got a phone call from the security company that were doing my background check. And then a couple of months in working that job, there was another job that I was working part-time, and that I realized it was utilizing me creatively even more. So I spent almost 4 years working with adult learners, understanding motivation into action. So when someone says, I want to do this, what actually contributes for that to come to life? And one of the common things that I realize is a lot of times, we carry around our own gremlins that prevents us from actually, putting the work that we need to put in order for us to move forward. So I want to encourage you today, as we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr., to not allow the gremlins that are within your head, or even the gremlins around you that tells you you can't do something, that you're limited, that you have to lessen yourself in order to move forward, to push them down, to find ways to build communities, to find ways to advocate for yourself, to find ways to be resourceful in order to push your dreams forward. So thank you guys so much for allowing me to share with you guys. Thank you.